So I'm trying to remember how we do this stuff again. It's been a while since I've been here. We are spending the rest of the summer and much of the fall in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, we need to know that Matthew likes to group things together. That's how he organizes things. So, in many places in his Gospel, he'll take an idea or a theme and he'll have several stories or examples about that. Or maybe he'll group together several healing stories in a row, or teaching stories, or parables. So today we are in a section of parables. Okay, thank you for listening. Now, as I was preparing for this, the first bit of advice I read is don't preach all of the parables. And it makes sense, right? So what am I going to do today? Preach all, yeah, okay. You all so get me. Yeah, that's it. In all likelihood, these 4 parables were not done at the same time. They were not part of a class called Parables 101, A Day in the Kingdom, right? But they are grouped together by Matthew. They are probably done separately, with separate audiences, separate points to be made, but Matthew places them all together. Why do you think that is, other than he likes to put stuff together? Why did he put these 4 parables together? They have a common theme, which is? Big things come from small things. They require action. What else? I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, they're all about the kingdom of heaven is, and then there's this metaphor. Okay. All of that is true. But there's one theme here that is easily missed or passed by. And that is, the kingdom of God is not what one would expect. The kingdom of God is not what one would expect. You know, we come to church on Sunday, we dress nicely, we shower beforehand, you know, we come and we look and things happen sort of middle class-ish because that's what we know. Since our childhood, that's the kind of worship experience we've had. But Jesus comes and he gives us some parables. He says things aren't necessarily like you expect in the kingdom. Don't be surprised. Or maybe be surprised. And don't be the same. Now, to begin with, there's a huge cultural gap between the time of Jesus and our time. Even between the culture of the Middle East currently and our culture. There's a huge gap. And sometimes that makes it difficult for us to understand. Now, as I look around here, few of you are farmers. Right? When was the last time you were actually at a farm? Probably been a while for most. So, there's that difference. Now, mustard seed, you know, when we think mustard seed, we think Heinz mustard, right? But mustard was a weed. It's the last thing they wanted in their garden. Because once you got mustard, that's all you got. Okay, so there's that little difference. And now we have refrigerators, right, for our preserving bread. Before that, leavened bread would not last very long in the heat. So once the leaven goes in, you're going to have to eat it pretty quick. Now, one of the things we probably don't realize, it says 3 measures of wheat, right? Leaven's put in 3 measures of wheat. So how many people could be fed with 3 measures of wheat? What do you think? What comes to your mind? 7 loaves? 7 people? 7 people. What do you think? I'm thinking a couple of loaves or something. 3 measures of wheat are enough to feed 100 people. We'll come back to that. But you see some of the cultural differences, the way we maybe think things differently, see things differently. And when was the last time you buried your treasures in your backyard? Right? Anyone done that? I want to know when you're going on vacation next. It was different, but you can understand back at that time, they never knew who was going to come through their country next. Overrun by this group, and then this group came through, and so it made sense. You bury your valuables in the ground. Otherwise, troops come in, they're going to take it. It's gone. It made sense. Even during the American Civil War, when the southern cities were burned, often people would take their valuables and they would bury it in the ground so that they wouldn't be lost. But nowadays, what do we do with our valuables? Safety deposit box at the bank. Yeah. Probably most of us have them. In fact, mine out at Bank of America at 8 Mile Road, you got to use your fingerprint to get in. You know, we got safety deposit. We take our valuables and we stick them there. You know, and we don't worry about it. Or what else do we do? We have insurance, so if we lose our stuff, we're covered. Not to worry. Not to worry. Yeah. Things are different. And when it comes to acquiring that precious treasure, something we just want, that priceless artifact, a jewel, or if you're a baseball, a Honus Wagner card, you know, that thing you just got to have. How do we acquire those nowadays? Do we sell all we have to get them? Take a loan. Take a loan. Credit card. Second mortgage. Home equity loan. Or if you're really creative, if you can find a venture capitalist to back you, knowing that after a few years you'll sell it and you'll both make a lot of money. Yeah. Things are different. We don't bury stuff anymore. Or if you do, let me know. Okay. Sorry. There is a huge cultural gap. And it's difficult then to understand what these parables are really saying. We have to get past that. As time and technology have changed, so have our values and our desires. You know, things have changed, and they're changing quicker and quicker. Did I see iPhone is celebrating its 10th anniversary just 10 years ago? It seems like they've been here forever almost. We were in the kitchen yesterday, and Sammy needed to call her mom to make sure she came and gave her a ride home. And so I instinctively pulled out the phone out of my pocket. And, do you want to call? She goes, I got my own. So, of course you do. You're a kid, right? Things change. Values change. Pearls in our day aren't really that big a deal. Everybody can afford pearls. They're made in great beds where they're just sort of processed through. You can go to Hawaii and there's these tanks on the streets where, you know, pick your favorite one and we'll open it up and there's a pearl for you. You know? But back in Jesus' time, pearls were hard to come by. They were very rare. And so when Jesus wanted to talk about what was the most valuable gem, he talked about the pearl. You know, divers had no equipment, no masks, no snorkels, no oxygen tanks, and so they would hold their breath, they would tape a weight to their belt, and they would dive for as long as they could, hoping to find something. And when they find an oyster, it probably didn't have a pearl in it. Right? It was rare, it was difficult. Now it's easy. So that pearl image made a lot more sense then than it does now. Now they're just nice. See, we're in pearls, right? Sorry, dear. I like them. They look good. They look good. They're just, yeah. Let's move along, shall we? I've messed with you twice today. Okay, so values have changed. There was a hiker in Southern California who found himself stranded and ended up eating a condor, an endangered species, because that's all he could find. Well, he was busted. And so he's taken into the judge. The judge sentenced him to a lengthy sentence. But before leaving, the man said, but at least hear my story, because there's some extenuating circumstances. He said, I was out hiking and got lost, and was hiking without food or water for 3 days, and I saw this bird on a rock, and I threw a stone at it and killed it, and I ate it. And then I ended up wandering for 3 more days and nights with no more food or water. If I hadn't eaten that bird, I wouldn't be here today. The judge said, yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Your life was at stake, so he commuted the sentence. The man thanked him and began walking out of the courtroom. And the judge said, oh, by the way, I'm just curious, what does a condor taste like? Makes sense. The man said, well, it's kind of a cross between a bald eagle and a spotted owl. I feel a parable coming on. The kingdom of God is not as you expect. It's surprising. There is no conventional wisdom in these 4 parables. There is no ethical moral to be followed. In fact, the man who stumbled upon a buried treasure in someone else's yard, covered it up, put leaves over it, went and sold all his head, came back and bought it from that poor man who didn't know the difference. And Jesus didn't condemn him. Right? We look for moral sometimes. That's not what this is about. At the end of the day, Jesus says to the disciples, have you understood? And they say, yeah. That's kind of where we are sometimes. The kingdom of God is unexpected. It's unexpected. Each of these parables in their own way speak of the true values of the kingdom. Archbishop William Temple said that life is like a huge store. Only pranksters have gone into the store, and for the expensive items, they've marked them very cheap. And the cheap, gaudy things, they've marked very expensive. He said the problem is we've bought into that. Our culture says this is important, and we have bought into it, even though it's not. Of course, the kingdom of God is like the pearl and the treasure that do not come cheaply. And in order to acquire them, you must let everything else go. One of the things you must let go is your own way, your own sense of importance. And that's not easy. Bernard Tristan won a contest that a newspaper had by providing the best answer to this question. If a fire broke out in the Louvre, and you could say only one painting, which one would it be? What do you think he said? Mona Lisa? We probably don't know a lot of paintings that are there to begin with, so that's as good as anything.
The one closest to the door.
The one closest to the exit. The one closest to the exit. This is not a kingdom parable. Right? It calls us to give up what we have, not to enrich ourselves. Bishop Wayne Clymer knew about the values of the kingdom. When he was a student and he was at a prestigious New England hospital doing a time of clinical pastoral education, he said that this hospital, very prestigious, had a clear pecking order, as most hospitals do. It starts with the medical department head, goes through the interns, registered nurses, nurses' aides, all the way down to the cleaning. One day, as Bishop Clymer and another student were there, they were being introduced to some of the staff that were around. They met a doctor, a nurse, a nurse's aide, and just outside the doorway was a woman who was washing windows. And no one bothered to introduce her to him. So he turned toward her and he said, I don't believe I got your name. She looked up a little surprised over her thick glasses, a bit startled, but she got a smile and she said, well, I guess I am somebody too. The bishop understood the kingdom values. It's not about titles, it's not about wealth, it's not about position. Now, as I always say, there's a cost to everything. In every choice that you have, there is a cost. There is a benefit and there is a cost. You will get something, but it will cost you something. That's how our decisions are. There is a cost in acquiring the great treasure. There is a cost in holding on to all you have. And Jesus is saying in this parable, what is it? Will you buy it, or will you keep all you have? Are you all in or not? On one occasion it said that Babe Ruth was chasing down a fly ball and his hat fell off it, so he stopped briefly to pick it up and put it on. In the meantime, the ball went over his head and it was a triple for the other team. There's a cost to everything. There's a cost to everything. Back when I had just gotten my driver's license, and I can point to the exact spot. I can take you there right now. Well, if we were in Michigan, I could take you there right now. So I just my license and I went over to McDonald's. It must have been winter because I had on my new suede coat. And so I got an orange drink and I don't know what else, but I remember the orange drink. And I set it down right next to me. And as I was going home, I turned the corner and it fell over. And it opened up and orange was getting all over my new suede coat. And so obviously I tried to take care of that. That's your immediate reaction. And almost at once I felt a bump. And as I looked up, I found myself in the neighbor's yard. Fortunately, there wasn't a tree there, and there was no car in the driveway, so I quickly turned to the left and went into the driveway and out in the street and kept on going. But you see how it is. Trying to save that $100 coat, I put at risk my life in a car that cost $4,000, which is probably a lot back then. One of those days. What will we choose? Every choice has a cost. Will we make the right choice? Now, one of the things that these four parables say is that to be part of the kingdom of God, we have to be all in. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I looked up. It's a gambling phrase. Yeah. Okay. Stop it here. So, Jesus is saying, in order to be in the kingdom, it's going to take all that you got. You're in or you're not. Which is it? That's what these parables say to us. There is no partial in the kingdom. There is no halfway. Once the mustard seed starts growing, there's no stopping it. When the yeast is hidden in 3 measures of wheat, feeds 100 people. There's no stopping it. So, what can you do except to throw a great party and invite all your friends? It's going to rot if you don't. The treasure and the pearl require everything you own. It's all in the kingdom of God. A story about a young monk who was living with the Desert Fathers. And he asked the old men who had been around a long time why so many people came out to the desert to seek God, and yet most of them gave up rather quickly and went back home. The old monk said, "Last evening, my dog saw a rabbit running through the cover in the desert, and he began to chase the rabbit, barking the whole time, drawing the attention of other dogs that joined in the chase. There was great noise of many barks that night." He said, "Several of the dogs gave up after a short time and went home. A few of them lasted into the morning. But when morning finally came, the only dog that was chasing that rabbit was my dog." Do you understand? That's just like Jesus asking that question, right? Do you understand? He was more honest. He said, "No, I don't." "What do you mean? What's this story mean?" The man said, "It's simple. My dog saw the rabbit. My dog saw the rabbit. Have you caught a glimpse of the kingdom? If you have, you know it's worth giving up everything." You know Mel Fisher? Anyone know? You don't know Mel Fisher. Mel Fisher is a guy who discovered a Spanish ship that went down off the Florida Keys some centuries before. Now, he was fascinated with looking for lost treasure. Well, he's probably fascinated with the hope of finding lost treasure. And so through research, he figured out about where this ship would have gone down, and he figured it's probably going to take him about 12 weeks to find it. And it did, at least 12 weeks. Those 12 weeks turned into 12 years, and those 12 years turned into 15 years. And on that 16th year, he found that buried ship. He gave everything because he had a glimpse of the kingdom. A few years back, we had a vacation Bible school, and we had an adult vacation Bible school class with them. On the last night together, we shared some of our faith stories with each other. We talked about how God had brought us into God's kingdom, community. In each case, it was like we stumbled across a treasure, a great treasure. We sold all we had. There's never a question about the presence of the mustard seed, the leaven, the treasure in the field, or the pearl of great price. It is whether or not we plant the seed, bake the bread, pay the price for the field and the pearl. Are you all in to God's kingdom? Fred Ferret tells a story about his father, Nels, who was a theologian and author, well known. One of the significant points in his life was when he was 13 years old and he left his family. His family sent him to America for a better life. It was quite a day. The family gathered together and prayed. Each of the 8 children prayed, and then they walked Nels to the train station. As Nels got on the train, he saw his mother mouthing some words, but he didn't hear anything. This conductor blew the whistle, and the train began to move along the tracks out of the station. His mother ran alongside and yelled, "Nels, Nels, remember Jesus. Remember Jesus." What would we most likely yell? Remember your mother. Remember your father. Remember your family. But she had a glimpse of the kingdom. She knew what was most important. She knew the value of the kingdom. Remember Jesus.